morning, everybody. My name is Erin McGuire. I'm with the 14th Circuit Solicitor's Office, and JoJo Woodward and I are co-chairs of the Regional Task Force here. And I will probably talk to you a little bit later on. We are looking for some chairs for some of our subcommittees, including our community outreach subcommittee. And I believe that we have just identified our subcommittee's chair for the law enforcement subcommittee. Angela, if you don't mind just standing up and saying hello, introducing yourself.
Good morning. I'm Angela Serrano. I work with Hardyville Police Department. We'll need excited to meet everybody.
Thank you for I just put you on the spot.
Yep. Basically, Angela will be getting with all the agencies in our 14th Circuit that's in the Lowcountry Human Trafficking Task Force, and she'll coordinate with other law enforcement officers to, for training, for events or for investigations and things like that. So, thank you, Angela.
Appreciate that. Thank you. So I just want to make a couple of announcements. There's refreshments in the back. Just feel free to help yourself. The restrooms are over here, and there's also items here on the tables. Feel free to take what you need or want, and they're there for your use and distribution. So, all right. With further ado, I'm going to go ahead and have our primary speaker, Catherine Moorhead. She's from the State Human Trafficking Task Force, and she's going to review the 2024 annual report. So she'll have sort of a global view, and then she'll break it down, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's happening here in the Lowcountry. And our task force includes 5 counties, which is our judicial circuit, and so that includes Jasper, Beaufort, Colleton, Hampton, and Allendale counties. And there's law enforcement from quite a few of our partner agencies here this morning, so we certainly appreciate that. Also members from SLED, and I'm not sure if there are any federal agents here, but if there are, welcome. So, Catherine, I'll go ahead and turn it off to you.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks, Ginger. As Erin mentioned, my name is Catherine Moorhead, and I am the director of the South Carolina Human Trafficking Task Force, also the director of the Violence Against Women's Act programs. I have some staff here today that I'll introduce as I'm presenting, so you all know who the key people are at my office, or our office, in case you need to get in touch. I don't know, how many people, has anybody been to this presentation before? Is there anybody that hasn't been to this presentation before? You haven't? Okay. All right, where are you from?
Taplow Group.
Then you haven't. All right, so that's good, because I'm going to, for some of you, it's going to be old hat. Looking at Logan, he's going to be like, I think I know the definition of trafficking. But I'm going to go old hat because I never know who's in the room, and I think it's important for us to define human trafficking the way that we look at it before we talk about the data in the annual report. So you all know that this is how, this is the law, this is the definition, and I break it down so that it's simple. So essentially, for those that haven't been here, we look at this like an equation, right? The first part of the equation being force, fraud, or coercion, and the second part something of value. When you're looking at a situation, that's what you need to think. Is it force, fraud, or coercion? And is it something of value either promised, directly, received directly, or indirectly by any person? Now, any person, that word any was changed in 2018 in legislation so that it can position law enforcement and prosecutors to bring charges against the person purchasing the commercial stacks, right? Now, when we talk about force, fraud, or coercion, under 18, and this is only relevant with sex trafficking. If minors under the age of 18 and they're involved in commercial sex, they're automatically sex trafficking victims. That does not pertain to labor trafficking. So if it's a minor under 18 and you believe they're engaged in labor trafficking, you have to have the force, fraud, or coercion. Again, under 18, and then these are examples for those who don't know the definition of all of those. You know, we talk about, many times you've probably heard Attorney General Wilson mention force, talking about the movies, talking about Taken, That's how most of America had really learned about human trafficking, what people tend to think of now, right? You see the thing with the white vans and the kidnapping and all of that. That tends to be the least, it does happen, but the least likely form of how it begins. The fraud we see quite often, people being recruited for jobs. Remember years ago at a college in Columbia, there were advertisements, flyers asking people to come and interview to become a model, right? The president of the college and the law enforcement said, don't go, don't go. They were recruiting and having people go to motels for their interviews, quote unquote, with the intent of sex trafficking the young women. Now, coercion we see quite often. The psychological component, the grooming, right? When you have someone older that's sort of romanticizing the situation and grooming their victim, the psychological component comes into play. For those familiar with domestic violence, we see a lot of similar psychological components. We also see quite a bit of drugs and alcohol being used to control victims. That is a big reality. A number of years ago, a chair for our healthcare subcommittee at the state level, who's a professor of nursing at MUSC in Charleston, mentioned that somebody who was addicted to opioids once told her that when you're on the opioids and you're coming off, you want more opioids like you want air to breathe and to live. Now, if you think about that, traffickers understand that addiction and the fact that somebody will do pretty much anything to get more of the drug that they're addicted to, right? So it becomes a very powerful method of controlling people. Now, anything of value is very subjective. You may think of money, because people talk about this being a $150 billion a year industry. However, what we see is it's something that someone may need. We always look at the hierarchy of need. If you think about runaways, 1 in 6 is likely trafficked within the first 48 hours. They're looking for shelter, they're looking for water, they're looking for food, the very basics. Traffickers target what people need, right? And it could be food, it could be a place to sleep, but we do have gangs. We've seen an increase in gang-facilitated trafficking in South Carolina. And that can be a little complicated in terms of one person has 5 people they're trafficking, another has 10. You know, the person with 10 victims is going to have more respect on the street. Is respect something of value for a gang member? Yeah, right? So it's very subjective. Now, in 2012, legislation was passed positioning the Attorney General as the chair of the South Carolina Human Trafficking Task Force. You'll see here that the mandate is to include sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and also victims, United States citizens and foreign nationals. So when we talk about victims of this crime, you may encounter both U.S. citizens and foreign nationals. Both fall under our Victim Bill of Rights under our state constitution. So they have the same rights. Just pointing that out because there's been a lot of questions about that lately. So we focus primarily in the early stages with sex trafficking, but we are trying to increase the emphasis on labor trafficking because we are seeing an increase in that form of exploitation. Now, these were the original mandated members, the state agencies. You may look at this and think, anybody think that somebody, maybe some state agencies that aren't on there should have been added? You think of anybody? Think about kids, think about adults. Think about cases you may have worked. Logan, what do you think? I can do about this. Who should have been on this list in hindsight, right?
So I want to add one.
Yes, please.
Minority affairs.
Minor affairs. What about with kids?
DJJ.
Department of Juvenile Justice. We talk trauma, we're talking about what? Mental health, right? Department of Mental Health, DOTIS. The Department of Education. There are a number of agencies, state agencies that weren't included in this mandate, but that are at the table actively engaged in anti-trafficking. We do plan to have this modified to include those state agencies moving forward. Now, this is the structure of the state task force. For those of you familiar with the Indirect Crimes Against Children, the ICAC task force, you know that is completely just law enforcement. Given sort of the intricacies and the complexities of this crime, we had to take a multidisciplinary approach. When I arrived in December of 2016, there was one subcommittee, a direct services subcommittee, and it combined adult concerns and minor concerns. We knew that they had different agendas, so that was the first split, the first two subcommittees. And then we looked at how do you identify, how do you respond to this crime? What do we need to be able to have this continuum up here in South Carolina? And obviously law enforcement has to be at the table. Thank you all for being here today. And then you have, obviously the direct services have to stick around. Then you have healthcare. It's an estimated up to about 86% of the victims engage with healthcare workers while they're actively being victimized. So you have people that, all these people who are going to identify victims, hopefully if they're educated and they know how to do that, you need to have them at the table. How do they respond? Who do they call? And then we started building out from there. Community outreach is obviously important to better educate the public about how to identify, but also how to report the crime. And interfaith, there's a lot of faith communities, churches and temples and what have you that would like to contribute to the anti-trafficking efforts. Oh, I did go pretty quickly by survivor advisory. Now, input from those with lived experience is obviously pretty critical as well. Now, this is how we broke up the state. We broke it up into 4 areas, tried to align it as closely with other state agencies that are at the table, SLED, the Department of Social Services, on and on and on. Well, some of you may have already met James Massey, who's right over here, who is the Lowcountry Human Trafficking Program Coordinator, responsible for supporting the Lowcountry Regional Task Force efforts. He also supports and facilitates subcommittees at the state level. You want to tell everybody what you do at the state level?
Yes, so I am the liaison for the Interfaith State Task Force Subcommittee, as well as law enforcement and legal innovation. So what I do is I work very close with, last year in 2024, we did an enormous job with ensuring we did law enforcement training around the state of South Carolina. I did work with SLED as well as some organizations, national organizations that came in and provided training to law enforcement there in the state of South Carolina.
Sitting next to James is Cameron Singleton, who is the newest staff on the team. And Cameron is over the PD area and will be the liaison for the healthcare subcommittee and the adult direct services. Now, I should point out, the entire state is covered in regional task forces, except for the PD has 2 left. So within this year, our entire state will be covered with regional task forces, which is a big deal. So we're happy to have Cameron on board to help us do that. Ashley is here, Ashley Bishop. She is a human trafficking prevention education coordinator. For those of you that don't know, Traffic Proof SC is our prevention education curriculum. We just won a Telly Award for it this year, in 2024. It's free for middle and high school students, well, schools. We are about to, Ashley is over the Lowcountry and the PD area. We have one other coordinator that does the Midlands and the Upstate. We are going into phase 2, so the original curriculum composed of 4 videos is really for kids that are in mainstream schools, middle schools and high schools. We realized that there's a lot of others, like at EJJ and in group homes and what have you, that are vulnerable and at higher risk. And then we need to have a different curriculum to provide them that it looks a little bit different. But we partner with SCETV, and we should be rolling out the second phase of that in 2025. Now, the regional task forces, as I mentioned, we have 2 left. We have the PD and the 3rd Judicial Circuit that will be rolling out in 2025. We did restructure some, and most of the regional task forces are aligned with judicial circuits. Seems to make the most sense. So the 2024 annual report, as part of the 2012 legislative mandate, is that we create an annual report each year that is given to the governor, the speaker of the House, and the president of the Senate. We obviously release this to the public as well. And we keep a copy posted on our website if you're interested in reading it more in depth. But I'm going to let Lieutenant Roy come up and talk about, we have a number of sources of data that's in the report. So we get data from SLED, we get data from the Department of Juvenile Justice, from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and from the courts. But I'm gonna let him speak to the SLED data and then I'll come back up.
All right, good morning. As Kevin said, my name is Dave. I work for SLED and supervise the human trafficking unit for WTAC. Got agents all throughout the state that work human trafficking cases on a regular basis in partnership with local and other state agencies and our federal partners. What happens every year in January is we report our information that we've received and worked through over the course of the year. And so every year we provide that information back to the Attorney General's office for the report. This year, for the 2024 numbers, we had 285 tips that were investigated or came into our agency in that time period. Those tips included 392 potential victims. The majority of what that looked like is our children, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. This particular slide is here for me to highlight the fact that if you or your agencies or community partners want to share this information about our tip form, this was created this year. We have it both in English and in Spanish, and we have this here to where folks can go on anonymously and report different trafficking situations. We share this information back to our local partners so that we can work together to look into information received through this tip form to make sure that we're tracking it and as well as sort of help us understand where trafficking may be occurring across the state. So out of the 285 tips, the majority of those, as you see, were sex trafficking investigations or complaints or information that we received in any particular investigative lead. And 10 of those were both sex and labor, and then 18 covered just labor. These tips, by the way our area or regions are broken down, you can see that the Lowcountry had 75, Upstate had 92, our PD region 46. A lot of folks believe that, or previously would say that trafficking in South Carolina would occur or could only occur in Myrtle Beach, right? But oddly enough, we receive less tips in that region of our state than we do anywhere else in the state. So kind of interesting to look at in terms of the information that's coming in for tips. But we receive more phone calls there from there than anywhere else. Is what Catherine will highlight is in the National Human Trafficking Hotline report. Horry County is typically in the top 5 for reporting different leads or different information as to what might be happening in that community. We have seen an increase in our Piedmont region, our upstate region, over the course of the last couple of years. The breakdown is 317 females and 75 males. The majority of these are reported as minor children because a lot of our, what happens is a lot of the reports that we receive come from our different state agencies, such as DSS and DJJ, where they're reporting based on their screening protocols, potential or confirmed victims of human trafficking based on, the folks that they're encountering, minor children that they're encountering in a number of different ways. This is not me.
I try to put that in a weird spot, but speaking about how many children are being trafficked in South Carolina, we only have one program that has residential programming for female sex trafficking victims, and they have a total of 15 beds. So if you go back and look at the number of how many kids are being identified as victims, you start to see the problem that we have in terms of placing these kids in much needed services. So I threw that in there because as a response to this 315, we asked, the Attorney General asked for $12 million, asked the General Assembly for $12 million to build residential and community-based programming. And the General Assembly gave us $6.5 million for residential programming for kids. So we are going to be rolling out very shortly a grant program with that $6.5 million. We need to see at least another 3 residential locations for female victims of trafficking, and we'll open the first program in the state for boys who've been either sex or labor trafficked. So that is coming out, and I wanted to throw that in there because we are paying attention to those numbers.
Sweet. Out of the tips, though, I will tell you that Beaufort had five. We had 5 in Beaufort, 2 in Colleton, 1 in Hampton, and 4 in Jasper over the course of the 2024 reporting year to the task force. So the top 5 counties where we saw these things reported with 2 there in the second place position, I guess you could say, was Greenville, Charleston, Richland, Horry, Lexington, and Berkeley. This typically aligns with the top 5 counties that come from, oh, you had that in there. I put it on the phone because anyway, if I would have looked at the slides on the way here, I'd have done, I'm sorry. So anyway, this covers sort of the gamut of where we have those tips coming from. What we do know is that a lot of the information that we receive, it covers the state. So you could have a tip that gets reported to Beaufort County, for instance, about some things that have gone on with a particular victim in this county, but there are things that also went on with that victim maybe in another county across the state, because when it comes to human trafficking and a lot of our other criminal conspiracy type situations, whether it be narcotics or illicit substance related investigations, there are no borders with that. There are no boundaries, there are no jurisdictional lines, and that's why it's important for all of us to work together in these circumstances, because of the fact that we see all this kind of crossing over in multiple different ways. And we've seen that with all the investigations that we've worked throughout the state, and more specifically here in the 14th Circuit with our partners that are in the county.
Jake, can I jump in there and just say that has a lot to do that in 2015 legislation was passed that physicians, people started to recognize that human trafficking is crossing counties, right? AG will often talk about, when people come to work in Columbia every day, oftentimes they're crossing counties just going to work. And so that was recognized, and in 2015 legislation was passed for state grand jury to be able to take these cases that are multi-county.
I guess since I'm up here, I'll just highlight a couple of different things that we're doing as a law enforcement subcommittee or working group. Our concentration is in 4 different areas. The first is obviously working investigations in partnership with all the other agencies across the state that see these things happening in their backyard. The second is to ensure that we're assisting with conducting law enforcement training and getting our law enforcement partners trained in the area of human trafficking and what that might look like. The third is partnering with the agencies across the state to work on different operations to combat sex trafficking, whether that's the demand for sex, where we're targeting folks that are wanting to come and buy sex, or working operations in an attempt to come into contact with potential victims of trafficking. And then the fourth is obviously plugging in with the task force as a whole in an effort to make those systematic changes that we know that we all need, whether that be helping DSS and DJJ come up with new and updated screening protocols, or helping them train their staff and things like that. So those are the 4 areas that we find ourselves working in on a daily basis. Sam, yeah, that's what we do. That covered?
Yeah, you so.
That is not me,
Didn't feel like that.
but I appreciate they have to deal with it on a daily basis. Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
So as I mentioned, we get data from different sources. Department of Juvenile Justice not being a mandated member, so they don't have to be at the table, but they have really stepped up in terms of like screening and identifying young people, the juveniles coming into their facilities, and started keeping track of those that they identify as trafficking victims. You'll see here that they identified 63 total individual victims, and you'll see the breakdown of where these juveniles were from. We suspect that there's probably more young people that are being identified, but this is a good start, and I think tells us a lot in terms of the intersection of various crimes, juvenile crimes. So you'll see the breakdown, females to males. This also raises some questions about what kind of screening is happening with males going into their facilities, but we'll be looking at that a little bit more moving forward, and then a breakdown of the race. These were the you'll see here, of the 63, each victim was involved in the charge. These were the, they had at least one of the following charges, right? With the number one being the status offense of running away. So I highlighted the status offenses, and for those who don't know what a status offense is an offense that an adult would not be charged with. So running away, skipping school, being incorrigible, that kind of thing. And these kids should not be going into detention. But the issue is, those that are victims of trafficking that are identified are being put in lockdown because we don't have any other facilities to put them in. Now, we know that victims who may be involved with some of this may have been involved as a result of their trafficking. And we don't really want to be a state that puts victims in lockdown, right? Without any kind of services, any kind of mental health services. So that is something of concern, and I can tell you, I sit on the Governor's Juvenile Justice Advisory Council, and one of the biggest concerns is the fact that the state loses money because we put too many kids that are status offenders into detention. So we are highlighting this and trying to work on this, because if we have other resources for these kids, victims that need assistance, that need help, we can relocate them and they won't be in the juvenile justice. So this was legislation that was passed in 2024. Two pieces to this, the safe harbor bill. So let's say one of those kids committed a crime as a result of the trafficking, they're going to bring the charge. But if they can prove that charge as a result of the trafficking, it will be dropped, right? They won't be sentenced. Then you have the other piece of this, the affirmative defense. And I think the best way for the layperson to understand what that means is if you were trying to prove to a jury that you killed somebody in self-defense, it'd be the same thing with a trafficking victim. Proving to a jury that their crime was committed as a result of their trafficking. If that makes sense. I think that's the best way to try to explain it. And this was a good step for South Carolina, but obviously the affirmative defense it's going to be a tough one. If you think about it again, much like proving self-defense, right? So the National Human Trafficking Hotline, we've been partnered with them for a long time. We have a state MOU, and they share data with us. I want to point out, though, we're seeing the data shift. And the reason I think for that is prior to 2018, right? If I were to ask law enforcement, let's say 3 o'clock in the morning, you're called in, there's a 12-year-old at a motel, there's condoms in the trash can, you know this 12-year-old didn't get the room, what are you going to do with the 12-year-old? Call DSS. Okay, but what if you couldn't call DSS? What's that? Parents, right? Returning to parent or guardian. So prior to 2018, that's what the deal was. The only thing that law enforcement could do with a juvenile, with the minor, was to, one, let's say they think it's sex trafficking, they might take them to the hospital for a sexual assault examination, or two, return them to their parents or guardian. Now, we know that parents and guardians, there's a lot of familial trafficking in South Carolina, so we may have been returning them to a trafficker. So in 2018, legislation was modified, the definition of abuse and neglect was modified so that now the Department of Social Services is able to respond, well, they're responsible for responding to minor victims of trafficking, whether it be sex trafficking or rape trafficking. Now, what changed as a result of that, right? So now all of a sudden, abuse and neglect includes human trafficking. If I'm a teacher and I suspect that a student is a victim of trafficking, what am I supposed to do?
Report it.
What's that?
Report it.
Report it, right? We have mandated reporting laws in South Carolina. So now all of a sudden you go from, say, a teacher who may have called the National Human Trafficking Hotline because there's nothing else to do with this child, to a teacher calling local law enforcement and Department of Social Services. So you see the calls start to stay within our state and within our channels. So we started to see a shift in the national hotline data as a result of that. You'll see here there's a total of 64 reports and likely 111 victims. And also, Lieutenant Roy mentioned, you know, that these are oftentimes, Greenville, Horry, Richland, and Charleston are oftentimes in the top 5 for reporting human trafficking. I don't think that that's like a huge shock to anybody. We're talking about more populations, right? You also have regional task forces that have been there historically longer. Spartanburg tends to go back and forth a little bit with Dorchester and some other counties. So this is not a huge surprise, but you'll see that the numbers are starting to go down at the national level, but the numbers are increasing at the state level. And you'll see here also, we've seen year over year more labor trafficking reported at the national level. That may have something to do with language barriers. They have, I don't know, I think it's 137 different languages that they can communicate with victims and people that call the national hotline. So it may have something to do with that. And also, a lot of people don't recognize labor trafficking. I think that mostly they're victims of labor trafficking that are calling the hotline. It's not people reporting the crime. So in the forms, the victims by form of trafficking, you'll see here, we continue to see sex trafficking. There's always an emphasis on sex trafficking. Much of what we've been talking about in this presentation is about sex trafficking. But we do have staff that are focused on increasing awareness about labor trafficking. And you'll see here the top 5 labor trafficking venues. Again, I don't think any of this is a real shock. You get small businesses, housekeeping and cleaning services. You start to look at the areas with more tourism. We partner with the Restaurant and Lodging Association, and we have a couple videos coming out for the hospitality industry. We also launched Travel Watch SC the year before last, and we work with folks in the hospitality industry as well as transportation. The sex trafficking venues, hotels, motels, again, that makes sense, right? Pornography, escort delivery service, people ask questions about that. And typically those are advertisements online, and then the victim is delivered to the location for the commercial sets. Illicit massage businesses, the last I knew, what are we looking at? Something around 140 illicit massage businesses across South Carolina. 140. That's a pretty good number. And then residence-based commercial sex. Excuse me. Some of the highlights from 2024, as James mentioned, we did quite a bit of training, law enforcement trainings. How many did we end up with? 8, 9? Yeah. 9 different areas of the state. They were 2-day trainings. We also did a 1-day gang-facilitated human trafficking training for law enforcement. The online resource directory, I think this is important to touch on. We were mandated in the 2018 legislation to create this resource directory for law enforcement and members of the bench. We had created a map directory on our website that you can go by county to see what resources there are when responding or working a case. We started this by putting those that are designated as sexual assault forensic excellence designees. We put those in there by county. We put children's advocacy centers on there by county. And we're shortly, hopefully within the next few weeks, going to roll out our state level certification for agencies working with victims. Once they're certified, they'll go on that map. We also know, for those of you working cases, which healthcare facilities have pediatric sexual assault nurse examinations, so you're not wasting your time going to one hospital or another that doesn't have it. A lot of different information, and more of that will be pushed out in 2025. I mentioned Travel Watch. We also worked with the Irena Project at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, to create a toolkit for media. I think we have somebody who posts a courier. We'd share that with you if you give me your card. So a number of different initiatives, and James touched on the trunk or treats as well, and I also spoke to our prevention education curriculum. I encourage anybody that has kids, has grandkids, has nieces, nephews, what have you, I would encourage your schools to bring this prevention education initiative in, because ultimately we would like to prevent this from happening in kids, rather than just responding to the victimization. So these are some of the task force initiatives for 2025. We had the inaugural Advocate of the Year Award that we presented at a press conference at the State House earlier in January. And our SC Wax for awareness, as I always tell people, those that know me, they know I'm obsessed with my dog. And this was a campaign where we had leashes and social media. The social media campaign to get awareness out, have people help us spread awareness by involving their pets. We mentioned the human trafficking grant program, the $6.5 million that will be going out, and you'll see some other items up here. I think the Human Trafficking in the Carolinas Conference, we're planning a conference in Columbia in July, and we're going to go back and forth with our counterparts in North Carolina to host that. We will have special tracks for law enforcement, as well as healthcare, direct services, and members of the community. So we will share that information. Aaron, I'm sure we'll share it with you all once we've got that out. We'll also have a state task force podcast for those that would like to keep up with what's happening in our state. Now, multiple ways you can get involved. We have these online. We've been sharing these on social media. And we also have task force meetings. If you can't travel to West Columbia where we have our meetings, you're more than welcome to join the virtual meetings. You can jump on, you sign up for our listserv on our website. Now, again, reporting. Jade touched on it, but these are the reporting methods that we highlight with people in the community and some resources, and that is my information, but I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have about all of this, because I can go fast, cover a lot.
Isli, could you go back to that on slide of how you can get there?
This one,
I just want to make it, I want to take it to Sheila.
so I can point out here, if you're interested in a presentation, you can request that on our website, and if we can feed it out as needed for those presentations in different areas of the state. As we roll out, I would encourage, if you're in a position where you want to contribute, but you don't have the time, if you want to make some kind of donations, you can look at our resource directory that we're building out, and you'll see the organizations who've been vetted, screened, their programming. Those are the agencies that would be great for you to contribute to. So that's a way for us to ensure that the public is supporting and contributing to organizations that are doing good work. Again, I mentioned encouraging schools to bring in our curriculum and signing up for our newsletter. Again, if you sign up for our listserv on our website, you will get our notifications about meetings and the newsletter. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, or X. And that's it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you very
Georgia,
much.
happy to answer questions anytime.
Article PD?
Hey, good morning. All right, my name is Walker Michelle. I'm the lieutenant over the investigations division for the city of Hardyville. My chief couldn't be here. He took some well-needed leave, so he welcomes everyone to Hardyville. I'm gonna go real quick. I'm just gonna talk about a couple cases we've had since the last meeting, okay? We've had one case of a juvenile sex trafficking case that was successful. We worked with our partners, the SLED and the human trafficking team. They've been very helpful. Our victim services center with the solicitor's office has been great. We have a brand new victims advocate, and I'm gonna point her out, Miss Gloria, who's been amazing. So a lot of the learning curve that we've had starting this whole thing is that we have to stop looking at every commercial sex case as the defendants, or just throwing people in jail for prostitution and being done with it. So the biggest learning thing I've seen during this training that we've had with SLED is our fact finding, which has increased the success of recovering some of these victims. I think that has been that and broadening our horizons when it comes to victim services, whether it's nonprofits or anybody else, has been the best that we've had lately. And that's what's helped us grow. More recently, we had 2 weeks ago, we've had a case that we don't have any familiarity with, or I don't, nor do any of our investigators. I know SLED and HSI does, with Venezuelan nationals, some of the gang members that are committing some of these offenses. We had a successful case a couple weeks ago. Our team jumped on it very quickly. They came into town, and as you guys know, we have a nexus to the state line. We're right on the interstate. We have some hotels that these places, these people frequent. So it obviously, I think SLED says it best, Hardyville's kind of the gift that keeps giving when it comes to these cases. I've heard that a lot. So as unfortunate as it is, it keeps us busy. So we've tried to stay on point with it, and we've tried to stay more proactive than reactive. And I think that's where we've found some success more recently. And when I say more recently, within the last couple of years. But we did recover 2 victims from the last case. Miss Gloria and some of our other victim services did a very good job getting them help. SLED as well, thank you. We just want to continue the relationships and to grow them as much as possible. The only thing I can say is that what I've learned is kind of broadening the horizons when it comes to outreach and trying to figure out exactly what to do, because sometimes it's very frustrating to figure out how to get these victims the services they need. So that's been the hardest part. But any questions for us on any of these things? I can't go into some of the details in some of the cases because obviously they're ongoing. But does anybody have any questions at all? No?
Is there anybody here from Fresh Start who we have? That's
I didn't see her. I was going to give her a shout out, but they helped us out a lot.
Thank you. She was a great resource.
All right. Anything else? And obviously we've got our new sheriff here, Sheriff Malfris. I think he's going to come up next, and we're going to continue the working relationship we have with the sheriff's office to include our task forces and other resources. Yes, sir.
I appreciate you allowing me to be here this morning. One thing I'm not is a public speaker, so I ask you to please bear with me. I wasn't expecting to be put on the spot to speak, so bear with me. But as a new sheriff, today I've been in office 40 days. I'm sure you all can imagine that the workload is great, and I want to share something just from the heart, because I don't have a speech up here, and I don't have a slideshow, and just getting involved and trying to get my feet on the ground with my new role position. One thing I plan to do as the county sheriff here, which I think is vitally important, for one, we have to educate our people. The biggest thing is the law enforcement, the uniformed folks that deal with the public every day. They are the backbone of our agencies. But they have a great ability to build relationships with the families. We saw the slides. We know that juveniles and truancy and runaways and all the things that we deal with multiple times every single day. These are the kinds of folks that our uniformed officers have the unique ability to build a relationship with. So one of the biggest things we need to do as department heads is to make sure that our people are getting the appropriate training. Can you imagine how many public contacts that our officers have on a yearly basis? Thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not more, throughout the country. So my goal as sheriff is to make sure our people are trained accordingly, because, like I said, the uniformed deputy has contact with the family and they can build relationships, and if they're trained accordingly, then they can begin to see the early stages of what's happening, and obviously can curb that, the greatest learning quickly to be able to intervene and obviously contact the resources that are available to these defaults. But one thing I would like to do is this coming budget year on trying to put some presentations together to ask our county council to fund us a couple of new investigative positions. One of those would be a special victims investigator, but the second one, I'd like to have a gang investigator, and with the gang investigation, we'll also do human trafficking. I just don't think, one issue I know that a lot of agencies run across, not just here, but and locally, but also on a national level, is funding. And there's the state and the South Carolina trying to make some changes to that, which nationally, that's the biggest thing. I know they're slowly beginning to get these grants things out there that eventually, it'll catch on and it'll spread. But it's much needed. And just from a local law enforcement level, like the training is important, and working together, like Walker said, it's very important that all agencies, not just in this circuit, throughout the state, along a coalition of different groups, that we coordinate working together. Because I promise you, we're dealing with some of the same folks. right here in the low country of Jasper County, I promise you, there's some kind of connection to Greensboro and Charleston and Myrtle Beach. Because I've always said this, and some of you may disagree, but I believe it's ingrained here in truth. Oftentimes what we're dealing with is organized crime and this disorganized person. And I say disorganized not because officers don't want to do it, but because most of the time, there's so many other issues that we have to put emphasis on. And we're fighting budget issues, and we're fighting manpower issues, and we're fighting a lot of things. So as this group moves forward, I believe you're going to see it become more organized, and I believe you'll see federal response, and these numbers are going to continue to go up. And I hate that we even have to stand here and have this conversation. I remember as a little kid, probably 10 or 12 years old, I remember sitting in church one day, and I heard the pastor, I couldn't tell you who it was, but I remember he says, there'll become a day and time in your life where good will be taken with evil and evil with good. And that's why we're sitting here in this room as an organized group. We have this good fighting evil. So I implore you, keep what he's doing. It's a great thing. I look forward to being a part of JoJo. Thank you so much, and everyone who's been a part of this. Thank you, and I look forward to being a part. Thank you. Yeah, good. What is that? What's it? We got the date.
Yeah, it's James.
Two.
Engine size. Big. Range. So the
Sage,
sorry.
David, you got anything back? Sure.
There's that one. I forgot to introduce it.
As mentioned earlier, I am the program coordinator for the Lowcountry area down here, so I work very closely with JoJo Woodward and James Aaron McGuire. And one of the things Aaron mentioned earlier that I want to reiterate, that one of our goals this year is to build capacity for this regional task force, starting by discussing and meeting and putting qualified individuals in our subcommittee chair positions, as well as building out members for those subcommittees. And one of the things we focus on all of our subcommittees, but we focus on 4 in particular. And the reason why we focus on these 4, where we start with these 4, is because oftentimes traffickers come into contact with first responders from these different professions, and that's healthcare, that's community outreach, as well as law enforcement and direct services. Right now, we do have someone in position for our direct services, as well as law enforcement. We do have somebody in mind for healthcare. Just got to get the green light from Catherine on that individual. We're looking for somebody for community outreach, as well as the other subcommittees as well, which is interfaith, legal innovations, direct services with adults, labor trafficking, etc. I'm down here most of the time when we have these regional task force meetings. We also going to work on having leadership meetings as well. Aaron did a great job last year of having a resource fair event. We look to have that as well down here, where we get in contact with small organizations here in the Lowcountry area, have them come to our regional task force, rub elbows, network, talk about some of the work they're doing here, some of the things they're looking forward to seeing in the community as well. So that's some of our goals for our Lowcountry task force. This individual here happens to be Matthew Benfield. I didn't want to butcher his last name. He just got on board about
a month ago. Like James said, I'm Matt Benfield. I started with the with the Attorney General's office with the Volunteer Women's Side program and the Verbal Coordinator. I've been in contact with a few of you, I think, so it's good to put faces to names. But I'll be working with DVCC's and the SRT's office for assistance statewide. I'll be doing these kind of witness ceremonies. I'm sure some of you are aware of kind of witness ceremony, but if not, it honors families of domestic violence, homicide victims. For the year prior, I'll be doing trainings or leading trainings for the VAWA training, so speak up. Sorry. I'll be doing trainings for VAWA, so law enforcement, prosecutors, solicitors, victim advocates, health advocates, victim service providers. We offer 4 of those throughout the year, and then we're looking to do a webinar series this year, starting up hopefully next month maybe, but we'll see. But just with everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Contact information. You have an email?
Yes, well, I wish I had my business card. I don't have it with me right now, but it's Matthew Benfield, B as in boy, ENFIELD @scag.gov. Again, Matthew Binfield at scag.gov.
You can find much of the contact information. Matthew's is on the development section of the Attorney General's website. And then all of the Human Trafficking Task Force contact info is under Human Trafficking.
Yes, www.scag.gov/human trafficking. I have some business cards as well, if anybody's interested. Look forward to seeing you all at our next regional task force meeting. Look forward to talking to you all as well. I do see some familiar faces down here. I've been in this position now for about 2.5 years. I'm pretty much seeing most people here. But I look forward to seeing you all at our next regional task force meeting. So it's like, fine, thank you.
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit off of some of that that our previous speaker said. So if you didn't get an agenda, I encourage you to pick one up. It does detail the listings for the regional task forces, next meetings. So we decided to be able to kind of have an in-person, and then we'd have a virtual, and then an in-person, and then combo in October. October here is very busy in terms of lots of opportunities for events. I know that some folks here have asked, like, how can I get involved if you're just sort of a lay person? And we could use some help. The task force could use some help in participating in community events and helping to just get the word out and educate other people about human trafficking. So if I could, get some volunteers, that would be wonderful to help me attend some of these community events. That would be fantastic. So I'd just like to highlight in August, we will have the Community Expo again and Resource Fair. We'll have it here in this room. So if you are a service provider or if you're a philanthropic organization, which we have some folks here that are, their goal is to help those who have been victimized by human trafficking. If you want to set up a table, you are more than welcome to do that. I will send out additional information and you can sign up for that. I'd also, if it's okay, I'd like to just point out some of our attendees here today, including Jennifer Talley. Many of you know her, but if you don't, I'd like to just try and introduce you. Jennifer Talley is the person who fits in that 86-87% where you come in contact with a victim of human trafficking. She is a SANE, which is Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner. I will put her on the spot and just let her introduce herself. So she's the person who oftentimes is treating those who have been victimized by human trafficking. They may not self-identify as being trafficked. Catherine had touched on that a little bit. Particularly if there's sort of like a pseudo-romance scenario involved in which the person who is being trafficked, is addicted and or their handler or late pimp, for lack of a better word, is, feeding them and they believe that they're in a romantic relationship. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and just put Jennifer on the spot just very quickly. One thing I wanted to ask Jennifer is that those that you come in contact with who have been trafficked, what is just your experience, and just talk a little bit about the services that you do provide.
Good morning. So my name is Jennifer Talley, as she said, and I am the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner Coordinator for the 14th Circuit. I say coordinator, but I don't coordinate very many people because there's not very many SANEs to coordinate. And I mean that on a global level. So I am a certified SANE A, which means I am certified in treating those adolescent and adult I am P-SANE trained, so pediatric SANE trained. And the difference is that I've completed all of the education and clinical and didactic work, but I haven't sat through the certification test for the pediatric portion yet. I'm getting there. It's very overwhelming. But just for a reference, I believe there's maybe 34 SANEs in the state of South Carolina. There are about 1,800 globally. So there's not a lot of us. I do see victims of trafficking. Most times they do not identify as victims of trafficking, especially the adolescent age, because they are seeking that independence and they feel that they're getting that from the traffickers. They're getting money and phones and all of these things that they wouldn't have without those traffickers. So unfortunately, most times they don't identify as a victim. I will tell you that probably the hardest thing for me is that I can't force a person to receive my care, assessment, services. It can be offered, but I cannot force them to receive that care, and that's regardless of age. I can educate them. I can talk to them about, the risk factors and, their health risk factors as well, but I can only offer them that. I can't force them, and that would make me, a sinking knife, essentially. So, anybody have any questions? I will say, I know that Catherine mentioned having the information about the hospitals who are safe designated. I don't think any of our local hospitals are safe designated.
I should have said healthcare.
However, our program is safe designated through the AG's office. So for the adults and adolescents, we are working on final steps to have that pediatric service available. But in the meantime, adolescent and adult, our program is safe designated and are able to provide those services to the adult and adolescent population. If you ever have any questions when you encounter someone, please reach out. I'm not just a person that sees somebody who wants a SANE exam. I'm also a resource of information for you guys. So if you ever have a question, you're not sure if they meet the criteria for a SANE exam, or you're not sure if it should even be offered or where you should take them, those are questions that I can answer and that I would be happy to answer. So please reach out. That's what I'm here for.
And there's Jennifer's contact information is over here on this table, so please feel free to take a business card. She is very open and receptive to to answering all questions. Anyways, is there any other specific questions that I can try and answer for you, or if I can maybe ask any of our law enforcement police step in for some additional information or questions you would have? Thanks, Jojo, do you want to add anything?
No, I just appreciate Catherine coming and giving the presentation, bringing everyone from the AG's office, the solicitor's office for, allowing y'all to come here and present. Sheriff Malthus, Hardyville Police Department, all law enforcement, all other agencies, citizens. We need this room full of people. It's kind of like the sheriff said. Sometimes we're full and then sometimes we're not. But putting that word out, and we're going to do our best on the, our next is a virtual.
Yes, our next will be a virtual meeting, so I will go ahead and create that virtual meeting and then send out the link. Most of you, I believe, if you have signed up, I will have your email and you can participate that way. I know that a lot of people are working on a Monday morning, so that's a way, an opportunity for people to participate and at least chip in if they want to attend. And so that is going to be April 28th, and that is on the agenda down the bottom.
Right. And then we look forward to training. We did get some training last year. We had that 2-day training down here. Any training we can get is better than nothing. And we always have new officers. We got a new sheriff. We got, a lot of education. And I think, and then us coming together and actually doing stuff together, operations like with Hardyville PD, I mean, like you say, for some reason, it likes to happen down here. But Walker and them do a good job. And again, I appreciate everyone coming, and we look forward to seeing you next time.